Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 3 of Meta of the Storm. I am Bleedies here. I'm running the production today, and joining me, as usual, is the super talented, super informative Lauren. How are you doing today? You are muted, buddy.
I'm so excited that I forgot to even unmute myself. How's it going?
It's going fantastic today. Yeah, man, there's a lot of things to cover because there was a lot of Heroes of the Storm action this past weekend.
Was there not, man? Very exciting stuff. Burbank, I had high hopes for Burbank, and it did not disappoint by any stretch of the imagination. Baba Booey, again, shout out to you, man. You did a really good job Friday. It was very exciting stuff. The tournament overall was just crazy, man. The North American scene is wide open, still anybody's game, but I can't wait for Sweden.
Yeah, and you know what? That's actually going to be our first topic today. We're going to talk about some of the results. Well, first of all, we'll discuss the results, and then we'll talk a little bit about what this show is, which is, about the meta. That's what we want to get to. Of course, we all love the drama surrounding rosters and things like that. So we'll get into it. Quick things. First of all, starting with OGN, a little bit of surprise there in the finals, where it was Tempest versus MVP Black, who had looked like the dominant team, not only in Korea, but of the entire Heroes of the Storm scene. So it was quite shocking to see. Not only did they go down, but am I mistaken? It was actually a 0-3 decision in their favor.
It was a 0-4, actually.
Oh, okay.
Tempest is they're looking like beasts. I mean, again, and what I really like about that is, one aspect that I always want to see change for the Heroes of the Storm scene in meta is, there's usually always like one or two really dominant teams in each respective region, but it seems like that's starting to shift across the board now with, teams like Tempest showing up and doing their thing. So it definitely will make the meta discussion as it continues to change
yeah, definitely.
really become fun to go over and talk about.
Yeah, for sure. Really, it showed the value of, what a lot of people talk about the Koreans is that they're, with their team fight, they're just so on point at going like at the exact same time in the Focus and Tempest. Man, they just took it to a whole nother level in that matchup. But once again, just covering over the results from the North American regional, that was a little bit of a difference too. I mean, everybody always wants to say, it's going to be Cloud9 or Naventic, but who ended up coming out on top there was Gale Force Esports with, I'll give you credit here. I see you smiling already. I know you want me to say it. You called it. You called it. I doubted it. I did. I doubted it. I really do love Gale Force Esports, but man, I did not expect them to go up and basically just a slam dunk.
Yeah, man. Quick shout out. How's it going, man? I have proof. I have documented proof on Twitter that before the start of the tournament, I said Gale Force was gonna win it all. And I went into it with confidence, and they did not let me down on that front. I expected them to do well. I knew they could do it, and they did it.
Yeah, man, especially, who got a lot of recognition. There's always the superstars that come out in sports, your Kobe's, your LeBron's, your KD's and stuff like that. I'm sorry, I'm a huge basketball fan, so that's why I'm referencing all of that. But, Crowan, man, he just came out and showed how much of a player and how much of a playmaker he actually is, especially on that Li Ming.
Dude, I was so surprised that Naventic was letting Li Ming go through, not only at Game 2, but particularly Game 3, because Li Ming, like Crone's Li Ming, was just shredding them at pretty much every stage of that series. I'm surprised they didn't try to change anything about that. But,
yeah, I could definitely agree with you on that. But, like I said, we could talk about that. Congratulations to Gale Force and Tempest. It's going to be interesting to see what happens in Sweden. But I know what you guys are interested in are, the statistics behind the tournament, who was being played, who wasn't being played. And so let's start off with you, man. Who did you see in the tournament play that you thought was really making a big difference in the meta?
In terms of heroes, I would have to say Tassadar, which was something of a surprise to me. Tassadar has always been a strong secondary support. He doesn't really, show up as a solo support anymore in any region. But there was just so much prioritization and emphasis on that hero. and the players behind that hero were able to make such a huge difference in team fights.
No, I totally can agree with you. I always said that whenever we were casting together in some of these tournaments, as you get later and later into the rounds, you know, first of all, maybe you see Tassadar get picked up in like after the second rounds of picks and bans, and then the next round you're like, oh, you see Tassadar get picked up after the first bans, and then when you get to the final rounds, people are like, you know what, we're just banning Tassadar because really what makes the hero so strong is the fact that he makes all the comps like more flexible. Like you can pick up a Tassadar first pick, and you can't say, man, we gave away so much by doing that. It's like, no, you can put any other support with Tassadar, and then especially if you pick up Sonya after that, which we saw those two compared together had an absurd like win rate.
Yeah, their synergy is I mean, it speaks for itself. Tassadar, like you were saying, is such a very diverse and dynamic hero. I'm looking at these stats that were posted by D the Hunter on Reddit. Shout out to you because this is a really cool set of information. Tassadar was the most first picked. Out of the 11 times, or the 23 times he was involved in the draft, he was first picked. And I think that really speaks to the flexibility and importance of the hero in that capacity.
Yeah, most definitely. It's funny though, like when we're talking about that, going away from Tassadar here with these statistics you're talking about, Kael'thas and Rhaegar were actually both involved in 100% of games, which is interesting because that's really expected for Kael'thas. But you know, I'm glad that we finally had a tournament to back up some of these claims of Rhaegar being that, you know, top tier support, because we've always said it, like, you know, that's what it seems to be the preferred support for people to pick when they want to play it, and this tournament just proved it. I mean, a lot of times when I was watching these drafts go down, Rhaegar was actually picked up. Like if you were the second team and you got 2 picks, he was picked up in that. Like you know, you picked like a damage dealer in Rhaegar because his ultimate is just so powerful, resetting those team fights.
Well, I mean, one of the things we're going to talk about later on in this episode are the supports, but yeah, Rhaegar is very important in the draft these days. There's really only a handful of solo supports that can adequately respond to burst damage at that high level of play or any level of coordinated play. And you kind of need to take one or at least a support before you go into the second ban phase these days, I feel.
Yeah, once again, some of these stats you have to take with you know, a grain of salt because they fit with different comps or something like that. But if you want to know what the highest win rate hero was out of the entire tournament, Zagar actually was with an impressive 86% win rate. Of course, that is only, I believe it was, let me check really quick, it was 7 games. So a little bit smaller sample size, but Zagar having that really high win rate. Meanwhile, Artanis, I know this is one of your favorite hero, is one of actually the least involved not being picked. And Cho'Gall as well. I know there's been some talks about maybe some bugs with the way that Cho'Gall is working right now. I'm not sure if that comes into it. But where we saw tournaments where Cho'Gall was being picked up with Rhaegar and such, he didn't see any play at all. And Tyrael, that's a really surprising one to me. Tyrael actually saw a 0% pick rate as well.
Yeah, I think risk versus reward comes into play, especially with a hero like Tyrael. He can be, you know, in the right hands and in the right situation. Tyrael can look flat out broken. You know, a well-timed sanctification can save any team at a critical moment. But it's hard to really maximize the use out of that. And when so much is riding on that tournament, you know, the top 2 teams go to Sweden. There's money on the line. Do you really want to take a gamble with heroes, you know, like Tyrael, like Cho'Gall, who have merits, but do you want to stray too far away from sure bets?
That's true, and Baba Booey, like I said, we always try to keep this interactive, so thanks for the comment there, saying that Tychus is too good against Cho'Gall to pick it, and let me tell you, man, you just kind of blew my mind that we're living in a world where we can talk about Tychus being good at anything, but you know what, that just goes to show you how Blizzard is always trying to change things and shake up the meta a little bit, which, you know, we'll discuss a little bit about things that are going to shift the meta later with their new hero that's being released. A little bit of debate that we'll have, but
oh yeah, definitely.
That's going to be completely interesting.
And Shu, yeah, if I was in the tournament, Artanis would have been more involved. I can guarantee you that. Because I don't know, I still think Artanis is really good. We did talk about Tychus in a previous episode, and since then I did have a chance to play him some more, and my opinion of his new rework has definitely improved. With the added amount of warriors that are starting to show up in the meta, I was not surprised to see Tychus have a presence in that tournament, and he was putting out some numbers every time I saw him play.
Yeah, most definitely. And another little statistic I'd like to give, which I think is kind of funny, is that Murky, once again picked by C9, had a 100% win rate. So there you go, Murky mains out there. All of you like 3 or 4 players, you can pat yourself on the back and know that your pick is justified, right? But yeah, that's just a little bit that we wanted to touch on with that going on in the meta. But moving right now, we're actually going to move to our hero focus of the week, which, you know, last week we had a lot of fun with this when we were doing it, and now we're going to move on to Dehaka. So we get to talk a little bit about Dehaka, and I'll let you start off with just a generalization of what you think about Dehaka.
Dehaka is a hero that's near and dear to my heart. In any competitive capacity, I generally play the tank / bruiser role for any team that I've been on, #BTM. So Dehaka's a hero that I've had a lot of time to work with, and I think he's one of the most dynamic heroes in the game. His Q still has a 1.75 second drag, where you know, comparatively a lot of heroes have had their stun duration shortened. So having that makes him viable in almost any situation. He's a hero that can work effectively as both a solo warrior and in that secondary warrior capacity. He brings global presence to the table, so on maps like Garden of Terror or Cursed Hollow, I feel he's really strong on. And he's capable of putting out respectable, you know, damage numbers as well. He's a hero that, if you can play him correctly, you will do very well for your team.
I completely agree with you, man. I'm a soakaholic when it comes to Heroes of the Storm. I try to preach that to anybody that wants advice in the amateur scene whenever I'm casting him and stuff like that. We've talked about it in general before too, Lauren, when we were casting. It's just like, you can tell you can have 2 evenly matched teams in terms of team fighting, but the teams that can manage like those global heroes and get the most out of experience, so they'll look up at the board and see, holy crap, how did they get 2 levels ahead? You know, we have more kills than them. And that's where he really succeeds at, you know, that global presence on those huge maps with lots of vents or lots of bushes to hide in. So, you know, our first point here is we're talking about his place in the meta, which we just talked about, but his place in the composition / draft. This is a big debate amongst the, you know, the more casual player versus the more competitive player. People, you know, when he first came out, they're like, you know, Dehaka is not a solo tank. He's not viable as that. You have to have him as like a secondary. But then people like, you know, Airho brought him out and was like, he was the solo tank for like Tempo Storm and a lot of their comps and got a lot of success. So if you're drafting and you're saying we want to play Dehaka this map, where are you picking him up? Are you prioritizing other heroes, or you think you need to lock him in early in the draft?
In the current state of things, as far as the perception of Dehaka, you can afford to take him later on in a draft, I feel, except for on maybe like a map like Towers of Doom. Baba Booey makes a really good point. Surprised we didn't see Dehaka. I feel like he's decent into Illidan, who did see some play in the tournament and sees play at more casual levels of play. I think if you do see an early Illidan pick, it's always a good idea to have Dehaka in mind because, like I was saying, the 1.75 second drag is huge. That's more than enough time for a team to get their burst damage onto a hero like Illidan and just wipe them off the board.
Yeah, most definitely. I can agree with you on that. I think you're right in the meta that we're living in, where, first of all, when this meta first came out, it was all about assassins. Assassins come first. You want to pick the strongest one that you possibly can, which is still mostly true. Like, I'd say most of your first picks are going to be either assassins or Zul, depending on the type of map. But after that, you usually lock in your support, whether it be Rhaegar or Tassadar, depending on what's available. And so for this, Dehaka's kind of a surprise pick that goes towards the end of the draft because not a lot of teams are utilizing him. So I think you're spot on with the way it should go. If you want to draft Dehaka, make sure you go for in the map ban process for one of those larger maps and just kind of send him as your trump card. Even as a last pick, you can get quite a bit done on him. But now that we're talking about that, we agree kind of where he is in the draft. Now let's talk about builds on Dehaka. And this is exciting for me because I think there's a lot of different things that you can go, but at the same time, you know, because he's not as played as much, there's a little bit more. It's not like Muradin where it's like, this is where you go. There's a little bit more
Right.
room for debate.
Yeah, there most certainly is. There's a specific build that I use pretty much in all situations that I feel is a very good middle of the road between him being a solo warrior and a secondary bruiser. And I'd be happy to share that with everyone. But we can look at all the talents at each level. I've loaded the game up. I'm looking at the tier 1 talents. We want to just go from 1 to 20?
Yeah, man. I got them loaded up right here for everybody to watch here. And like I said, Lauren right there's going to be watching the chat, letting us know if you have any differences of opinions on us or if you agree or disagree. We're here to be interactive. So starting off on level 1, for me, if I'm looking at what I want to do here, Dehaka's skill shots are really hard to land. And he does have a mount ability, obviously, but it's the way that you can get around the map. So for me, I'm going to take enhanced agility most of the time because I really value that movement speed. It's really good at getting away and catching up to heroes. But if I'm not picking up enhanced agility, probably maybe tissue regeneration would be my second choice, with primal aggression rounding out the third if I had to pick another one.
I'm in complete agreement. In almost all situations, I go for enhanced agility, and I can explain why I go for that in some of the later talent choices that I pick up. But it's having that added move speed going into the late game is more impactful than I think some people may realize. I do consider tissue regeneration a situation where I'm the only warrior, and I'm worried that my support will not be able to keep me and the back line of my team alive. For tissue regeneration, the message I'm sending to my support is I'm going to try to take some of the load off of you, so you can focus your healing more on the back line. But in most cases, I do go for enhanced agility. Primal aggression, you get some value in the early game, but I think it falls off once you get past the laning phase, and then you effectively don't have a talent at that point.
Yeah, and here's I'm gonna respond to somebody in Twitch chat there, Silence, who I think why you see the EU really value that is because of the EU playstyle in general. We've talked about that in the past, and maybe that's changing a little bit from some teams that I've seen in EU, but they don't prefer to be super aggressive. Like, they're not going to be like, let's go Chinese bush meta gank all the time. They're going to try to, out-maneuver you, out-soak you, out-objective you. So Primal Aggression fits that because you can be all over the map as Dehaka and just get that extra experience from clearing out minion waves. And you don't go for those team fights until somebody is out of position or you have that level advantage going on. So I think that's why EU does prefer that. So there you go. Like, and Baba Booey just said exactly what I just said too. Which, man, really glad to have you here if we haven't already said that with Lauren.
Oh yeah,
excellent caster, excellent analyst. So moving on though to the next tier, we're gonna be moving on to level 4, which for me this is a really hard choice for me because I feel like Hero Stalker is a talent that I like to take in a lot of my games because I'm a really greedy person. Like, I feel like I can go... I have in my mind when I'm playing games, I'm going to be able to initiate for my team, get a lot of different takedowns. But if you're playing in a professional scene where sometimes you'll see games go to, like, 4 kills... Like, that's a lot of kills, like somebody fed in the game. One who collects, we're getting essence for minions, gets a lot of value. So those are my 2 go-to ones. I can't see myself taking the other talents any other time.
So 95% of the time, I'm going to go for Hero Stalker as well. I think it's actually critical and more or less required for Dehaka, especially in team fights. If you're going to take one who collects, you almost have to go for Primal Aggression at 1 to synergize that value. But to have those 2 talents, you're saying, like, I'm going to go out into a lane and clear this wave to get my essence up so I'm ready for the next team fight. Whereas Hero Stalker allows you to be out there. If you already have a bunch of essence, you can use that early to withstand the initial burst, amount of burst damage. You land a drag on someone. You yank them out of position, you get the kill, and then you're at 25 again. Every time you get a kill in a team fight, no matter how long it lands, hitting D gives you a significant amount of your health back, and that just gives you more sustain to serve the role of a solo warrior, or just to have the padding that you would need to to continue to stay out there and not become a liability for your team. So I think Hero Stalker is more or less required.
So there you go. We kind of agree and disagree at the same time. So I really think that that's pretty good. Moving on to the next one, I'll let you start off what you think for the level 7 tier.
For me, I almost always go Feeding Frenzy. Whether I'm looking to play as a bruiser, but particularly if I'm going to be the solo warrior, there are some merits to the other talents. I do think Symbiosis, if your team needs damage, could definitely, get you a lot of value. But shortening the cooldown on your drag, I've personally found to be extremely impactful. It affords you more opportunities to effectively peel for your team if you are the only warrior. And it's definitely cool to have your Q off cooldown when someone's trying to get away. If the team is trying to if the enemy team is trying to retreat, and you have that Q up sooner rather than later, and you yank someone back, not only are you more than likely to secure that kill, but you might entice the enemy team to try to help that person, and then they break away from their disengage and then continue to go into a disadvantageous position. So I like Feeding Frenzy a lot here.
I can agree with you. I like Feeding Frenzy myself. Though for more CC, I always value CC a lot. I really like Constriction because I like having that increased drag duration, so you can have one of those heroes that are really squishy, especially maybe like if you can somehow get a Tracer, props to you anyway, but if you can keep them positioned for a lot longer, or just their healer or something like that as support, I feel like you can get a ton of value out of that. But I'll agree with you. We're obviously valuing what's showing you what we're talking about here in this discussion to kind of just give you a broad feedback of that is if you want to play Dehaka, it's essential that you hit his drag. Like, that's it. Like, a lot of the talents are going to be based on, like, getting in position so you can hit that drag, because that's exactly what makes them unique. You get in aggressive positions across the map after you get done soaking, and you can just land these really big drags, so that's what's coming on. But now moving on to ultimates, I think this is one that's not under a lot of debate, though I have seen people argue this, exactly what they want. So I'm going to say that Isolation with a silence and slow and reducing vision, like, silences are huge in the game. Like, they're amazing for canceling out really game-changing abilities such as, a Divine Shield that could come out, or like Ancestral Healing, or just in general, like, if you're silenced, you just can't go anywhere. Like, Li Ming, if you land Isolation on Li Ming, she's absolutely done for. So that's I value all those crowd control abilities, so that's why it's taken. And Adaptation, it's just one of those things that seems like maybe if the team sees that you pop Adaptation and they still keep hitting you, and you have enough health that you live, you get value out of it, but it puts a lot of emphasis on, like, the team making a mistake and, either not killing you or just for some reason keep on damaging you and focusing you when you have that ability popped up.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with you. Shu said, would it not be a bit map dependent for some of the previous talents? Yeah, if Dehaka's going to be more in a role where he's going to be by himself in a lane, then some of those talents that gear towards different things can get you some value. But for me personally, I just prefer the more team fighting aspect of Dehaka. For the ultimates, though, I think you almost always have to go for Isolation, because Adaptation's like a more difficult Divine Palm without much payoff. Like, you have to have almost precognition to know when is a good time to activate this and when to take enough damage, because maybe I just haven't been able to master this heroic. But more often than not, I'm either using it too early and then I don't get much, if any, value out of it, or I'm using it too late and then I'm freaking dead. And it's like, well, I'm not gonna get any help back now.
Get adapted on, fools. But
right.
I could totally agree with you with that going on. So, in chat, you can let us know what you think. If you think that Adaptation has a thing, even if you want to discuss right now, we always love to just hear what everybody has to say. So if you want to think that ways they could change Adaptation to make it better, we could save that definitely for another day, because we do have our hero tune-ups that we also do during these broadcasts. So we'll talk a little bit about that later. But moving on to tier 13 here. This is an interesting one as well, because some people... for me, once again, it's all about move speed. It's all about aggressive positioning and getting your CC in. So I like Brush Stalker here. Brush Stalker is definitely the one that I prefer. Ferocious Stalker, sorry, I should say.
Now, see, this is where you and I start to diverge, because I feel like Swift Pursuit is 100% of the time the way to go. My reasoning for that is anytime you step into a bush, you get added movement speed. That synergizes well with the added movement speed that you get out of level 1. One of the cool things that I like about Dehaka is that you can brush stalk and wait for the right moment to jump out. With Ferocious Stalker, Brush Stalker increases your movement speed by 60%, decaying over 3 seconds. So the onus is on you to jump out right as you show up to get the most value out of that. The way I like to play Dehaka a lot is I'll wait in the bush for a little while, wait for the right moment to screw someone over, and then I'll jump out. With Swift Pursuit, I'll have the added 20%, and I can also use the added 20% to make an escape if I have to later on in the team fight. If you can just engage right out of the gate, then you'll get more value out of Ferocious Stalker, but I think Swift Pursuit is the more well-rounded ability.
You know, yeah, and that's definitely it's different ways that you can do it in your different types of playstyles. So, like I said, if I had to choose a second talent, it would be Swift Pursuit. So, I agree with you. Both of them have their value. I just tend to, the way I play Dehaka, and this is just individual playstyle, which you love it when they develop heroes that have talents that fit playstyles. Because, you know, like you can either be that person that waits in the bushes, or you can be that person that soaks, keeps on soaking like that E play style, and says, all right, now there's a team fight about to happen, let me get out here. But you know, it's worth talking a little bit as Baba Booey is bringing this up for Whirling Dervish, which reduces the duration of silence, stuns, and slows, and roots gets your hero while Dark Storm is active by 50%. You can never say that's a bad talent,
Right?
because I mean, it's for the same reason when you see other frontline heroes when they take Relentless, because it's a similar talent. You know, you take that if you see a lot of CC in comps. If you feel like, man, they have Tyrande that's going to lock me down on top of Muradin, on top of Zul or something like that. So, yeah, you can get some value out of it. So I think it's situational. So you're definitely right, Baba Booey. It's an option. So when it comes to the 13 tier, all of these are viable. I will say that. All of these are viable. It just depends on your personal preference.
Yeah, and I mean, one thing that I would emphasize here is I don't feel there's any right or wrong way to build this hero. His talents offer a lot of viability. If you are solo warrior, I do think that there's more of an argument for Whirling Dervish, especially if you've opted to take Symbiosis at 7, because then at that point you're effectively like always disabled. Like, you know, it's pretty much permanent. So it definitely has some value. I'm just a more offensive-minded player in general, and Swift Pursuit helps me do that.
There you go. So now moving on to level 16. I feel this is one of those talents that you could build this into the hero and I'd be okay with it, because you just take it. I feel like because your drag is so important, Elongated Tongue just allows you to, you know, catch those fleeing enemies as they're trying to get away from you from a much longer range. Make your ganks even more effective because they think they're safe. They're not safe at that level whenever you're hiding in those bushes. So 99% of the time I'm taking Elongated Tongue.
And so am I. I pretty much always go for that. Pterodactyl says, compared to other heroes, Dehaka's level 13 tier is weak. And I would agree with that. Dehaka in general is not a hero that gets a big power spike. I feel at either 13 or 16. What he brings to the table is immediate and apparent out of the gate. And I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with that. It's just something that you have to keep in mind. You're not really in a rush to get to these talents. They make your life easier, but they're not exactly required. The Q actually has a longer range than some people might think. If you can time it well, like you can yank someone pretty far, and and that's only going to be further, you know, made true with the increased drag range. I don't think you get value out of rapid regeneration enough to warrant that, because I don't really like how Burrow works in general. And we can talk about that, I guess, after the talent tiers.
No, I definitely agree. There's times you want to cancel Burrow, and it's like, oh gosh,
right?
I'm dying here. This kind of sucks. But answering your question there about rapid regeneration, it is heals you for 304 health over 2 seconds. So
yeah, I
I
think that scales, but in my personal testing Alpha Cactus, I've never felt like, man, I definitely am alive specifically because of rapid regeneration. And if I didn't take that talent, I don't know. It just doesn't feel impactful enough for me.
And something that I will talk about, since this is about the meta in a way, like things are balanced, and we have talked about that in the past. 13 feels like a weak tier for this hero. You know, like you're saying that level 16. I agree with you that it does, but at the same time, I feel like if you look at similar heroes, you kind of have to do that with heroes like Dehaka and Falstad. You can't make really hugely powerful tiers of talents like the mages do, because the fact that you get global presence, you get to be all over the map, controlling the way you approach objectives, getting that extra soak, makes you powerful in of itself. So that's why we have the Falstad problem for a while, and you can still debate since he's just an extremely strong pick, where it's like he's got the kit where he can soak so much and be in team fights with that fly, and then he's also got one of the best engages and disengages with Gus. So if you make heroes with strong talents and a strong base kit, then you run into balance issues, which, you know, we can argue with some heroes being that. So that's why I love Dehaka, because sometimes his talents don't seem like they matter that much. They're just like a little extra little bit, but the hero in itself is really powerful because of that.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. There's some really cool comments in chat right now. Alpha Cactus confirmed that it's 12.4% of your maximum health. And like I said, I think you get more value out of that if you could cancel burrow on your own, because you're effectively like mauling yourself, I feel, when you burrow, which isn't always a good thing. Baba Boo makes a really good point about the slow, and I Hate Toast 1 also makes a really good point with the synergy between paralyzing enzymes and executioner at level 16 if you have an assassin on your team that takes that. And I'm really glad to see these comments, because it definitely opens your mind to other ways to approach this hero. And I think that's me and Bleedy's goal, is just to, give everyone different perspectives and say like, oh, I didn't consider that in that fashion. So, I mean, even those comments now are making an argument for me to take some different talents.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we want to do, because even Baba Booey's making a good point. You're taking different heroes and different talents depending if you're playing with a 5-stack or you're solo queuing. So you always have to think about how there's so many different ways that you can play Heroes of the Storm. And I think we're going to see that even more with the new rank changes that are coming out, which are really exciting. We're going to keep seeing an influx of new players, and people will have to develop new strategies. And I always say, when it comes to picking talents and stuff, yeah, there may be the more preferred ones that you pick up. Like a good example of that is like 5, whenever it was like 5-button Uther. But if you're not good at it, take the talents that you're comfortable with, because you'll probably perform better. Which is going to bring us finally to the level 20, if you want to let us know what you think about those talents.
For me, I'll take the first crack at this. It always comes down to either Apex Predator or Hardened Shield for me. If it's Garden of Terror, it's almost always Apex Predator. If it's Cursed Hollow, it's more or less the same, though you don't get the value out of that around the keeps at that part. I do go for Hardened Shield otherwise, because by the late game, any burst heroes have definitely made themselves apparent with their 13 and 16 power spikes, and I would like to have more active control in dealing with that. In general, when I look at the level 20 talents, for the heroic upgrades, I always ask myself, can I get away with not taking this talent? Regardless of how good it might be. Like, Contagion's really good. Being able to silence a whole bunch of heroes is huge. But if I feel like I can confidently get isolation on just their support, I think I can get away with not taking the upgrade.
Yeah, for me, I really love Apex Predator, because it's just like, well, we can never really compare anything to Epic Mount, because that ability is absolutely insanely broken on Falstad, but it's comparable to it in a way. You like to have your Brush Stalker up because it's such a key component of the hero. If I'm trying to have fun, I'll do Contagion, because it's really fun if I'm playing with friends. And if I really feel that we're losing these team fights, I'm going down too fast as the front line, because they just specifically have a comp like with Toronto with that mark. And they're saying they're not afraid to burst down the front line. They're saying, all right, we're going to kill you first, and then we'll kill the rest of your team. Then I'll take Hardened Shield. But I'm going to say 75 to 80% of the time it's going to be Apex Predator.
Yeah, another really cool aspect of Apex Predator, and something that I try to keep in mind and sometimes forget when I'm playing Dehaka. If my Brush Stalker is up in a team fight, that is a really good escape. What can happen a lot of times with Apex Predators, you burrow into a place. It's on a 10-second cooldown at that point. You jump out, you engage, the team fight is on. By the time Apex Predator comes off cooldown, there's a very solid chance that any stuns that you were going to have to worry about on the other team have already been used in some capacity. So if it starts to get antsy, like, you can just brush stalk, even if it's 2 feet away. You're just saving yourself the trouble of a lot of damage, and you're kind of enabling yourself to re-engage again. And in general, I think that's an aspect to Dehaka's play that I think people could try to incorporate more.
Most definitely. And now we're pretty much done with the talents there. Is there anything else you want to discuss about Dehaka, Halorn, before we move on to the next topic? Or Chad, if there's anything else you want us to bring up or any discussion about Dehaka, let us know. What do you think, Halorn?
I would just summarize that Dehaka, you can reasonably or reliably take him going into the second half of a draft. I think he can work as a solo warrior. I think if you've already set up a stun chain with 2 other stuns, it makes landing his drag dead simple, and that definitely can secure kills. And I think we're going to see him show up more.
Yeah. Okay, so let's see. A pterodactyl. Sorry if I said your name wrong there. Halorn's the guy that's really good with names. That's one of the reasons why I like to have him on a show. But he says, so in conclusion, can he be useful in all maps, or is he a niche tank? I would say most maps you can use Dehaka, but at the same time, the larger maps with lots of those vents and everything, like the larger the map is, where you can split stick and you get more value out of them, that would be his best maps.
Yeah, I would agree with that. There's always going to be merit to Brush Stalker regardless of the map. The question comes, the comparison is usefulness to value. Like Bleez is saying, larger maps you're going to get more value out of Brush Stalker, but in a lot of cases it's always going to be useful. I do agree that he's more of a niche tank, but if you're finding yourself drafted like out of mainstay warriors, I think Dehaka is still considered a control tank with his drag, and it's just huge.
Yeah, man. And thank you guys for just contribute to the discussion right here. Feel free to keep on commenting. We don't care if, like, I know for me, I was talking to Halorn before the show and I wanted to ask him something and I completely forgot it. And then I remembered it like right before we started. So if you guys want to bring up something later, we'll still touch on it. We're not going to ignore your comments, but we're going to move on. Bring you back to our screen here, and we're going to move on to the next topic, which is going to be our class discussion, which last week we disagreed a little bit, which was good because we like to have diverse discussions about what the top 3 warriors were. And this time we're going to talk about what the top 3 supports are in the game, in our opinion. So I'm going to round it out by giving you my top 3 first, and Halorn will give you his top 3, and then we'll discuss why we think some of them are similar and why we think some of them are different. So I'm going to start off by giving you my top 3, which, first of all, I think one we're both going to agree on is it's going to be Tassadar. And then I'm going to put, right behind that, I'm going to put Rhaegar. And then for my third support choice, I'm actually going to put Tyrande as being there. And it was actually a hard choice to bring in that third one, but I'm interested to see Halorn's list before we debate this a little bit.
Well, I mean, again, this is top 3 support across the board. If you're looking, there's always going to be subcategories, and we can get into that in future episodes. With all 3 supports in mind, I would have to say Tyrande's my number 1. Rhaegar would be number 2, and Kharazim would be number 3.
All right. Now, there you go. We did have a little bit of a difference in there, so we're gonna have to see. For me, we both had Tyrande on the list, so we'll start off by talking a little bit about that. And the reason why is because for me, she just has the flexibility of being in a lot of different comps. We've seen her run in solo support comps where there's super aggression on that one target, so there's not that much healing that needs to be done. You initiate the team fights. And you do that. Double support comps where, you don't even have to go a lot of the healing talents. You can go a lot more of the damage dealing talents. And even with both those comps, we've seen Starfall actually being taken the majority of the time because that ultimate does a ton of damage and slows teams into lots of other different wombo combos and other heroes setups. So for me, that's exactly why she's one of the top in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, you're definitely skirting danger by doing it, but you can feasibly take Tyrande as solo support. It would definitely make your team more offensive leaning, which is, right up my alley as a player in general. But Hunter's Mark, I feel, definitely increased in value as other stun durations got shortened. The duration of Hunter's Mark hasn't been shortened, and just the burst damage potential that it brings out of the gate is not something that you can reasonably ignore, I feel. Um, I just think she can do too much for a team in the right hands. I just think she's the best support overall in the game right now.
Yeah, we're a little bit biased towards her. You can tell in our casting when we do cast together. But for the next one is going to be Rhaegar, which once again we both agree with. Rhaegar obviously can just heal through a lot of damage, a lot of the AoE damage that's in the game, such as Li Ming, Kael'thas, if he does end up going through drafts. And the reason why, like, this is going to be a common theme for me and what I'm looking for in supports, because all of them do some sort of supporty, healy type thing. It's their ultimates that change the game. And Ancestral Healing is one of those things where you use a lot of abilities on one target, you're focusing that target down. That Ancestral goes off, it's just, for one, mentally, it's like, crap, we don't get the kill. And then after that, it's just like we have to go through and either just focus on that target some more or change to a completely different target that's out of position now. And even deal with the fact that some of your own teammates might be out of position because they were going on that hero so long. So with that, for me, it just makes Rhaegar, combined with his mobility, an excellent, excellent healer.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's the most well-rounded support in the game right now. He did lose a lot out of, not being able to ancestral healing himself anymore. But I think by now players have adjusted to that, and they know that he can't really be like half melee assassin like he used to be because of it. But he's a very strong blend between single target healing and AoE healing, and you can take talents to, slant either way on that. Looking in the comments, some discussion about Uther. I would agree after his nerfs, he just doesn't feel too enticing. And I'll make a lot of my points about Uther once I come back to Kharazim in this discussion.
Yeah, and for me, the last one there that I put on there is Tassadar, and that's because once again, Tassadar has extreme amounts of flexibility. You can use him in a lot of different comps. Which this is where you this is the line where we toe the line here of, is he really a really good support since he needs another support? But for me, it's just he makes so many different comps, and the fact that he has to be banned out or picked if you don't want to go against him, it just makes him super strong. It makes him a priority in drafts and bans. But even then, discounting that, his ultimate Force Wall, that's the only ultimate that I really consider as viable on him.
Right.
Just can zone out teammates, can really set up a fight for people that are escaping to get those picks. So for me, he's really good. Right, it was a really big competition between him and Uther because I told you I value supports for their ultimates mostly. And Divine Shield, that's all Uther is, a Divine Shield bot. If you get it off, it can really change a team fight. But I just ended up going with Tassadar.
And yeah, I mean, he's not in my top 3, but that's not to say that he's not good by any stretch of the imagination. Like we all know the game enough to know what Tassadar brings to the table. He's really good. So I don't refute someone thinking that he's top 3 at all. A Pterodactyl said Tyrande doesn't synergize as well as Uther, Rhaegar, and Tassadar, and I understand that. I think Tyrande synergizes really well with Greymane. The added 25% damage can definitely secure the kill for Go for the Throat to be able to hit someone else with it. You get the proc reset on that. And again, I think it goes back more towards Tyrande is an enabler for melee assassins on an offensive front, where Tassadar is more like, I'm going to keep you alive so you can continue to do what you do. Tyrande is more like, you're going to be able to do what you do better, and I'm going to help you lock someone in a position to do that.
True that, and this is the ball's in your court now, Haloran. Go ahead and hype up Kharazim to me. I love him personally, so it won't be too hard.
So there was some surprise about Uther not getting mentioned in either one of our top 3s, and Baba Booey said it, perfectly. The stun reduction on Uther, in my opinion, sent him straight to the dumpster. I think he's a draft trap these days. As we start going into a meta or where more heroes that can kick out sustained damage come into play or AoE damage, Uther is going to struggle because his Q and W have such a long cooldown. The stun duration, that getting shortened definitely hurt him. And as far as saving someone's ass in a team fight, there's really 3 supports that can do that, I feel. Rhaegar with Ancestral Healing, Uther with Divine Shield, and Kharazim with Divine Palm. And I just think Divine Palm does the job of Divine Shield on a shorter cooldown. The mechanics are obviously different. But if you can time your Divine Palms well, I think it's more impactful than Divine Shield because it negates a lot of the damage. Like if you hit it right at the beginning and then while they're like getting their health back and whatnot, they're not eating any damage. So that's pretty much the job of Divine Shield in that moment. Kharazim brings a lot of mobility, not only to himself with his Q, but at 13, the talent that gives movement speed additions to your team. That can be used both offensively and defensively. He kicks out more numbers than Uther by virtue of his W having a shorter cooldown and a level 1 talent Transcendence. As long as he's forward and attacking, which again is more my forte, he's going to be healing someone for every 3 hits, and his E ability only adds to that. I just think if you can really sharpen your skills with Kharazim and you go into a draft and the other team takes Rhaegar, they're probably going to look to ban out Uther. And you don't really need Uther if you can play Kharazim well, I feel.
Excellent analysis. And one thing I will add to the fact that, for me, puts Kharazim above Uther in my tier list too, though he didn't make the top 3, is the fact that you can say, hey, look, they actually don't have a lot of damage. They're going for a triple or a double warrior comp. And you could say, I can switch to my offensive heroic. And it's viable because you still have enough healing behind it. For Uther, unfortunately, we've seen a little bit of some cheese come out maybe from when the top tier teams are facing some lower tier teams where they'll use Divine Storm. But for the most part, it's like you got to take T-Shield 99% of the time. For Kharazim, 50-50, nobody's going to look your way and say, oh, you took 7-sided strike, you're such a bad healer, because it is. Like, as long as you can play him different ways and still be really effective. And Baba Booey brings up a good point. This is just tier list if people are playing it optimally, because there's no doubt that Kharazim has the highest skill cap of like supports in the game. Like, you have to be in correct position. You have to make sure you know when you're dashing in and if you have a dash to dash out, as well as when CC is going out. You have to pay attention to so much abilities as Kharazim to play him effectively. So yeah, I agree with him. And you know what? He just missed my top 3. And he's a little bit underappreciated right now, I think, especially in the North American scene.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point. Kharazim is definitely a high skill cap hero. If you're not able to land Divine Palms reliably and have that kind of foresight, although I do think that there's something of a generous window for Divine Palm landing, you're definitely going to struggle. I think Kael'thas is just as much as a jerk to Kharazim,
I think Kael'thas is a jerk to everybody.
Yeah, like I think any support is gonna more or less struggle. By virtue of Kharazim needing to be around people, he definitely doesn't do well, or he could potentially not do well on that front. But I mean, Kael'thas is just a problem. Period. So
yeah,
that wouldn't dismay me from taking Kharazim.
Most definitely. So it's really good. I really love this discussion about the top supports. Next week we'll be talking about specialists. So by all means, if Halorn wants to type into his chat, let us know, on the Twitter for Meta of the Storm, which we just made, what you want to talk about specialists. Maybe submit your top 3 list of specialists in the game, and you can compare it to ours next week. But as we're going to get done with that, which thank you all for the wonderful feedback and suggestions. This is the one that is really key that we get your feedback, because this next section of the podcast / show is all about theory crafting. It's one of my favorites. It is called the Hero Tune-Up. And we try to make a hero that is not so good, has not been good for a long time, make them better in the meta. And this week we are going to be focusing on the Skeleton King himself, Leoric. So, Halorn, let's start off by just talking about what problems Leoric has. I see a look on your face right now. What problems Leoric has?
So I'm a little salty about Leoric in general, because I loved this hero when he first came out. He's one of my highest level heroes. I have him at level 13 right now. And I just feel he's absolutely dumpster tier these days in almost any capacity. He cannot solo warrior. You know, he's kind of fallen off on that front in the competitive scene, but there were just a lot of times where I would see, like, you know, Erho or Srey try to do solo warrior, like, at that level of competition. I was just like, maybe they see something I don't, because he has no stuns, he has no peel, really, outside of a slow. So he's just going to kind of stand there because he doesn't really do any kind of burst damage. He doesn't fit any role. He can't be a solo warrior. I think if you're going to be solo warrior, you almost have to have a stun. Unless you're like Arthas. And he doesn't really work in a bruiser capacity because there are other heroes that can do it better. If I'm looking for a bruiser, I'm always taking Artanis over Leoric. I'm always taking Dehaka over Leoric. I would take Diablo over Leoric. Like, I just don't see where you use him.
No, I agree with you. One thing about this game that we see that is completely true, and you've seen it with the patches to try to quote-unquote fix it. I wouldn't say fix it, more balance, is that CC is king. Like, crowd control, if you can lock down a target, it makes the focus so much easier. It makes it where they can't use their abilities and you delete them from the game. So if you're going to have a hero that doesn't have crowd control, like, you know, hard crowd control, say, not just slows or anything like that, they have to do something really well. Like, they have to do something else, just something that brings to the table. That's something, and that's exactly what Leoric doesn't do. Like, he's just too squishy right now. His, you know, Entomb can be really great, but there's a lot of heroes that escape it right now. Like, same problem that Butcher had, which is a change that we can discuss in a little bit too, and ways that I want to fix Leoric. And, you know, obviously you can get some value from his other ultimate, but it really requires people to be clumped up, which in this meta, there's just a lot of different people that can blink away from it. And it's kind of just relying on your teammates to be in bad positions. So what I'm going to bring out first for our balance changes and how we think we can fix Leoric is we kind of have to decide one of two things. Do we want to focus on Leoric being a solo frontline tank, or do we want Leoric to just be like a straight-up bruiser, like a Sonya type role? And I think if we debate what she should be, there's like a lot of different fixes that we can go from there.
Yeah, the way I play / played Leoric is definitely more damage focused. But I mean, again, that's something that I do in general across the board. I do think he should be geared more towards being an offensive warrior / the anti-tank of the warriors because of how his W works, where, you know, it drains based off of someone's maximum health points. I think that's why Blizzard has him in the game. A Pterodactyl made two really strong suggestions. Revert the W nurse and give him unlimited globes for his regen quest. I definitely think the change to Regeneration Master kicked him straight in the groin and, you know, limited his usefulness by a considerable margin. I do think the W nurse need to come back. As far as being an offensive tank, I think he needs a little more lockdown. Like, the increased slow, I think, should be in his base kit. Even like, it'd be annoying to play against, but that's why he would be a threat. And then later on in his talent tier, he should get a talent that just flat out roots people for a certain amount of time with his Q.
Yeah, so I totally agree with you with that the baseline should be with that extra slow, because you need to have that if you're not going to have any CC that's on him. I think that's one thing that's huge on him. Here's a concept that I came up with, and once again, I'm really good at coming up with ridiculous concepts that Blizzard would say, please, Bleedies, that's never going to make it past the floor. But I would like Leoric to almost be, because he relies so much on his W that when you don't hit it, it's terrible. Like, you're going to just die on the fight. I'd like Leoric to be a reverse Brightwing, where his W has a passive on it that while he's around heroes, like, you drain health, very small amount. Like, think of like health, like you drain a little bit of health from them, and you can use your W like you normally would, and that would put it on cooldown, and it would just basically give you that increased health gain from using a W on a target. So I think that would be really cool. Maybe if you could even make a talent like that where it would punish comps that are really stacked up, like double warrior comps, or if you have a Kharazim as well with those healers. I think that would be really cool to do. But from there on, like I said, I agree with you on that, and maybe having a root attached to his Q eventually as a talent, like you said. And for me, finally, I would say we see Entomb being the favorite ultimate because, once again, CC is just king if you can lock people down. I feel like you're copying the Butcher, but at the same time, it's the only way I can see it being effective at trapping Li Mings and other heroes that can blink out. Put a silence in it. Like, if they get trapped in Entomb, they're silenced so they can't get out of it. Like I said, I feel like we're just ripping off Butcher by saying that, but at the same time, it makes Entomb really useful.
Yeah, I mean, the upgrade for Entomb, it does like a small amount of damage. I mean, I think it's small to take it at level 20. Silent Shoes is kind of like the level 20 upgrade of March as far as the the reverse Brightwing thing.
Kind of like that, except not that ridiculous, because that obviously has a balance.
Like, I think that could work. I think that if you don't increase the slow in his base kit, you almost need to add like a reverse Brightwing aspect in some capacity to him to justify it. Or if he is going to get the increased slow and the root later, the root choice and the AoE reverse Brightwing thing have to be on the same tier to where like you get one or the other. Because I think having both of those would be pretty rough, all considered.
Gotcha. And we're seeing Butcher's ult was way better pre-silence because 33% lower cooldown, and if they used the mobility skill while rooted, it just peeled them back. True, yeah. I can kind of agree with that, but at the same time, there was just a lot of different things that could happen, and people could still hurt you a lot as Butcher if you didn't have that silence on them. Yeah, and you could not cleanse it, but now you can. So yeah, there's definitely ups and downs. So, but for me, obviously you can't cleanse an Entomb. Right. So that'd be really weird if you could. I think it would be a lot different for Leoric to do that. So I think we're all agreeing here that if we're looking at Leoric, he needs to have that freedom to get as many regen globes as he possibly can, and do something to make his ultimates more viable, as well as make him a little more tankier. Because right now, just with the burst that's in this meta, that's what we're gonna have to do. And it for these sections, like I said, for any suggestions that you guys want to bring in, we could talk about it. Let us know, because it's theory crafting. I'm sure Blizzard is looking at Leoric and thinking of things to do to him, hopefully, because when I think of the Skeleton King, he's like he's a huge dude. He's one of the first bosses of Diablo 3 that's really important, and I would like him to be a lot stronger.
Yeah, the 2 points that I would try to make towards the end of this discussion is that for March of the Black King, I've never understood why it has as long a cooldown as it does. I don't know. I think it either needs to have a 50-second cooldown with Entomb, or if it's going to keep the same duration, it either needs to do more damage, or you need to be able to like turn with it or something. Like you activate March of the Black King, and you have 4 seconds to attack like 3 times with your Q, pretty much. And it's just like the Q becomes like this lunging thing to where you kind of direct where it goes and you time when it goes within that window. But to just hard lock yourself into moving in a straight line as Leoric is more or less a death sentence. Or you're using it when you've already won the team fight, so the health you're getting back doesn't really make a lot of sense. Like if you're using it to secure kills and stuff like that, I don't know. If you're using it to keep yourself alive, I feel like you've already lost the fight. And if you're losing it to get kills, you've already won the fight. So, like, why? When would you really use this? I don't know.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you, man. It's definitely a hard task to do, and it's one of the hardest parts of this show for us to discuss how to balance a broken hero. Sometimes it's just like increase the HP, but it's never usually for Leoric. It's just because of the way that the warrior role is. It's hard. Like he's either got to deal a lot of damage like Sonya does, or and just be able to get in a fight and stay in a fight and do a ton of things, or he has to be really tanky. And so there's a lot of different things that people can do. Maybe the first start is like what he's saying right here. He was OP on release, just nerfed and power creeped into irrelevant. So revert him back to the original Leoric. Let's go from there and see what happens. But I don't know, man.
It wouldn't. I mean, that wouldn't be a bad. I mean, that would be safe, and then it's already been, an iteration of Leoric in the game, so it wouldn't be like a dramatic change. I just think whatever they end up doing, when you look at all the warriors across the board, they're all kind of, you see Arthas get picked these days, and it's terrifying because you know what he's gonna, like, you know what he's capable of. He can root you, he does a ton of damage, he slow you down, he slow your attack speed. Dehaka gets picked up. You're terrified because you know he can show up anywhere on the map, he can drag you out of position, he does a good amount of damage, he has a good amount of self-sustain. Someone picks Leoric, and you're just like, I'm gonna get slowed? Like, every now and again, he's gonna slowly drain health that, like, any other warrior would be able to do better? Like, give him something that people would be terrified about. Like, make him stand for something on that front. Whatever you end up doing. But he just is he's just not impactful.
Yeah, I can totally agree with you on that, man. See, like he says, it's hard to theorycraft ways of balancing without going into design intent of the hero. Yeah, and that's why I think Halloran made a really good point. You want to make him something about him terrifying because he's supposed to be a huge person in the lore, but at the same time, you want to make sure that he's fitting what the Blizzard's design is and not being too overpowered. So, guys, thanks for help with discussion of this. This is not the end of the discussion, though. It's never the end of the discussion with this show. So go ahead, tell us if you need anything. Even after the show, if you think some really cool things, go ahead and just send it to follow the Twitter at Meta of the Storm. And if you have a really cool thing that we look at and we laugh, or we say that's a really awesome idea, we'll make sure to feature it at the beginning of the next show because we love giving credit to the community and just showing people that we do care about everybody who actually comes here and watches us. But that being said, enough mushy-gushy stuff. It's time for a debate. We're going to be going on to the next topic, which, we usually have one debate per show. And this is actually going to be about the new hero, Medivh. And we're going to argue whether we think that he has a broken kit or not. So I know this is going to be a touchy subject for a lot of people because I see a lot of people already commenting, like on Twitter and just in Discord and stuff like that, saying that Medivh is literally the most broken hero in the game and there's no way to counter him, and he's literally going to cause us all to uninstall the game. So, Halloran, opinions on it? You know what? Let's bring up just his abilities first and let's talk about them before we even say his kit is overpowered.
Okay. So, I'm looking at the PTR patch notes, and we can just go from top to bottom. So the first thing is his trait, is Z, the Raven form. He transforms into a Raven, gets a slight, movement speed increase, and then he just can't be hurt. Like, he's immune to all effects. He can fly over walls and stuff. And I'm fine with that. I mean, you can definitely save yourself a lot of grief in a team fight if you were able to mount up and just, like, get away. Like, that could be really annoying. But I don't think that's overly broken. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
On the Raven form?
Yeah.
I think it's hard to say because Vision is absolutely one of the things that's like, hey, look, if you're in solo queue, Raven form probably isn't going to do much to you. It's going to be like, whatever, you can see me, and you're just like pinging your team, please, they're right here, they're really all low on health, and your team literally could say, I think it's time to do a siege camp. But on a professional level team where everybody's on comms, that Raven scoping out a boss on Cursed Hollow that was like almost timed in secret right there can mean so much, and you can't do anything about it. You can't counter it. You can't do any damage to them. They can literally fly circles. If you could B-step in Raven form, I'm sure it will be done. So I'm going to say in the right hands, I feel Raven form can be kind of OP.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's somewhat balanced by it only being an increased speed of 15%. If you jump into Raven form on Cursed Hollow to go check out, the enemy team boss, it's going to take a while for you to get up there, and it's going to take a while for you to get back. So you're kind of making a pretty big commitment. And, like, if it was normal movement speed, then I'd be like, yeah, like, that's just dumb. And Toast, I'm really glad you enjoyed the show, man. There's a lot of really cool stuff coming ahead that I think everybody in the community will be excited about. But yeah, thanks for stopping by while you could. But yeah, I think Raven form, Shu also says that it's interruptible with damage. I figured that you can get stunned out of trying to transform, but if you're hit at all, it stops you. Then that's pretty big.
Yeah, that is pretty big. I could have sworn there that you couldn't be. I guess it doesn't say. It says he is immune to all effects. So I guess okay, that's why I thought. So he's not immune to damage, but I guess he can't be stunned or anything like that. Okay, so all right.
Well, once he's a Raven, he can't be affected by anything.
Oh, okay.
But like if you hit, from what I'm gathering from what Shu's saying, if you hit Z and start like transforming into a Raven, if you're hit at all, even by like an auto attack, then you like the channel's broken. You can't turn into a Raven.
Okay,
that makes sense.
All right, and so let's start off with, for now we're moving on from that, I'm going to go on to Arcane Rift, because this is an ability that nobody's going to be like, oh, right, whatever. It's just a Q, right? Launch an Arcane Bolt that deals damages to enemies in a line. And I believe also if an enemy hero is hit, reduce the cooldown by 5 seconds and refund 30 mana. So it's one of those spells that it can, if you keep on hitting it, it can obviously start doing a lot of work, especially since we're not going to really get into too many talents today, because I think next week we'll actually have a hero discussion specifically for Medivh, like going down talent by talent, what we're thinking the right builds are. But yeah, so it's one of those that it'll be really strong in the hands of people that can hit skill shots, but people who can't, whatever. So I think personally that one's balanced for me.
Well, one thing that I can say is last night McIntyre of Team Navintic had played a game as Medivh. And one thing that I saw about Arcane Rift particularly is that this is a surprisingly strong ability. You know, at face value, it doesn't do a lot of damage. But in the laning phase, if you can reliably hit someone that's just like standing behind the minion wave, your wave clear is going to go off the charts with Medivh. Like, he was hitting this guy that was playing Vala like non-stop in the laning phase. And the waves were just disappearing, and then Vala was starting to eat the minion damage, and he was just winning the lane hard. So I think that's an aspect that some people might not anticipate. But at the same time, Arcane Rift, if you're just allowed to stand there and attack someone in a team fight, like in Sky Temple, like over the objective, the damage is going to start to rack up too.
Absolutely, man. Moving on to the next ability, which I'm not even sure if we're going to be able to have an effective debate against this, because Portal Force of Will creates an protect an allied hero from damage, and if you read a little bit of the tooltip, protect an allied hero from all damage for 1.5 seconds. That is a mini divine shield that is on a 5-second cooldown. You can use it to prevent things like Pyroblast completely out of there, maybe even Greymane's ultimate when he's going to be able to cast it, Artanis' laser while it's going off, if you do take that. It's a lot of different things.
Force of Will, I think, single-handedly is going to shift the meta. Like you said, it's pretty much a mini, divine shield. It does, I feel, the job of Tassadar's Q in a more reliable capacity, because Tassadar's Q is just a shield. It's temporary health that's going to go away. Force of Will just negate damage for that long. I think it's going to change the meta and create more of a focus on sustained damage, because if a really good player can time their W properly, it can negate any engagement whatsoever. So if you got like a hero like Jaina, where it's ability based, and you blow like your W and E all on someone, and then they have this Force of Will on them, and they end up taking 0 damage, like, you're kind of boned. But if you have a hero that does more sustained damage like Raynor, then this isn't as impactful. And if this is the direction that Blizzard's looking to go, I just think burst damage heroes are gonna fall off in some capacity.
Yeah, it's definitely a way to see this burst meta, and maybe a way to deal with it. Moving on to the next ability though, Portal. Creates a portal that allies can pass through. So looking at the tooltip on that, create a set of portals between you and the target location, allowing allies to teleport between both. The portals last 6 seconds. This is one of those abilities that is either going to be one of the best abilities in the game when used properly. Once again, for he's a high skill cap hero, or you're literally just going to be a teleport portal right into like a boss stun, which everybody goes into and just dies immediately. Thoughts on this? For me, I'm going to say, just the potential playmaking ability, not even looking at talents right now that you could deal with it to set up lots of interruptible things. Oh my goodness. That allows you to be so mobile and allows you to do lots of things.
I think it's messed up, man. Like, it's going to be like the best ability in the game or the worst ability, depending on your team's ability to use it effectively. Like, again, I said I saw McIntyre play a game with Portal, and if used as an engagement tool, like, you know, you're out of the lane, and then you have like ETC or something on your team, and you just throw a portal behind some guy in the laning phase, and you just jump out and blow him up. Like, there's nothing you can do about that whatsoever. In that, it's really strong. But if you use it like in the middle of a team fight, one thing that's really interesting / awkward about it is if your teammate clicks on the portal, they go into the portal. So if they're trying to like heal someone or they're trying to attack a specific enemy, they could very well just find themselves in the portal out of position and just super annoyed by you throwing this portal in there out of nowhere. So it's interesting to use.
Yeah, you know, I think it's definitely interesting, and I think it'll require a really high skill cap in order to do things. But moving on now to what most people want to hear about is, like, what are the more effective ultimates coming from him? Let's talk about the first one, Polybomb. I want to know what your thoughts about it, Haloran.
It's definitely going to be a skill check against different teams. I think it won't be as impactful at the professional level, just because people will know how to spread out and not allow this to just chain forever. At the more like the high-end Hero League level, people know how to get away from chain bomb enough to where it might not be as impactful. But if a team doesn't know how to move away from each other and they just sit there and continue to polymorph themselves to death, like, this is gonna look dumb, like broken dumb.
I totally agree with you. Maybe some different things, like with slowing abilities. I'm thinking, like, you know, Tyrande dropping, you know, Starfall, or maybe, you know, KT, the level 16 talent. Sorry, I'm spacing on my mind exactly what it's called that slows after the chain bomb goes off. Could also land a lot of different combos. But for me, I think Polybomb will be one of those that'll start off as being the most picked one, because it's like, oh, you can CC people, and CC is always strong. But, you know, for me, in terms of actually like a more skilled players and like landing a skill shot and having a big effect on that, I'm going to lean towards Leyline Seal. I think eventually is going to be picked more, which we'll go over that right now. Unleash a wave that disables enemy heroes. After 0.5 seconds, unleash a wave of energy that imprisons enemy heroes in stasis for 3 seconds. So this is obviously something that can hit more than one person depending on how the wave goes out. It's something that can be dodged though, so if you don't hit it, it's completely useless and it goes on an 80-second cooldown. So I'd like to hear what you think about Leyline Seal.
I think this is ultimately going to become the favorite heroic. There's already been something of a foreshadowing for how to use this in a team capacity. In Void Prison and in Chromie's, like, you know, locking people in stasis or whatever. So if you're able to line this up and hit a bunch of enemy heroes at the same time, the graphic for it is very straightforward, and it just has a timer and it goes down, and you put like a Leyline Seal on 3 members, and then Vala shows up and Rain of Vengeances everyone as they come out of that. Like, you've dumpstered their team.
Yeah, there's
like
definitely...
the wombo potential is pretty easy to set up. Like a 0.5 second delay is not that hard to really set up. So 3 seconds is more than enough time for even like an uncoordinated quick match team that aren't in voice comm to be like, oh, I have 3 seconds to blow this guy up. Like, I'm just gonna be ready to hit, like, click on this guy.
Yeah, most definitely. And for me, I'm thinking of a situation for me, the dream is playing Warriors a lot, is ETC. You just slide into a person and then you're just able to initiate your mosh pit right as it's ending, and there's no counter to it. Like, if you get multiple people, you just sit there and you're going to mosh them. Of course, you know, if there's people that aren't hit, they can stun you maybe, but I just always thought that was going to be an interesting combo that's going to be there. So, yeah, definitely. But after we're done discussing the skills, one thing I wanted to bring up was the fact that, you know, what Blizzard, I think, is starting to go with their hero designs, and Medivh, I think, is a step in that right direction. They've talked about trying to make it where they want playmaking heroes that show off skills. So like, you know, it's really cool to watch and you can impact games. And I think we saw that a little bit with heroes like Li Ming, you know, Tracer, and other ones that, you know, that can do stuff and make plays all on their own. But they saw that people were banning out all these heroes. Like, you know, they were just getting banned out in the draft. So now they're just going to keep making more of them, and you can choose to start banning a lot of these playmaking heroes. But I think we're moving towards a direction where it's going to be eventually you can't do them all. Like, there's just going to be too many heroes that can make a big impact.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely would agree with that. When the last episode of Meta Storm, I was staunchly opposed to Medivh. I was like, this guy is going to be just, like, broken. But like you said, it does open up the idea for you know, playmaking potential. And I hope that this becomes more of a direction for future supports in the game. Like, this is a very active hero that you have to frequently involve yourself to get the most value out of what he does. And I think if they use that idea as a template for more supports going forward, that it'd be really cool for the game.
I totally agree with you, man. The only problem that we're going to have, which we'll end up discussing as future more and more heroes come out, is that if you're going to keep having all these playmaking heroes, you know, this is a specialist right here. You have a playmaking support like, you know, Rhaegar or Kharazim that can make those ooh plays. But you can keep doing that, and eventually it might phase out heroes like Raynor, like Vala, like Jaina. Yeah. Well, you know, maybe you could argue Jaina if they somehow change Ring of Frost to be more playmaking. But they're going to have to start updating these heroes to do something so that they don't just immediately there's no reason to pick them anymore because they're old heroes that just have boring kits that don't change a team fight as much as these other heroes.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with that. There are some heroes. And what's up, Jay? How's it going, man? There are heroes that have fallen into, you know, a state where they're just irrelevant. Like Leoric, like we were talking about earlier. Raynor, I feel, is in that category. Tyrael, I feel he's in that category. Just by virtue, like, his mana costs are insane, and it's more of a hallmark to how the game used to play as opposed to how it is now. Like, these newer heroes tend to have abilities that are on shorter cooldowns. So heroes like Jaina are going to suffer, and they are going to be in need of more update as this philosophy Blizzard's moving towards comes to pass. I want heroes to be more active. I do want there to be more outplay potential, but it does create something of a power creep scenario where these more active heroes just become too much for the older ones to deal with.
Yeah, which, you know, that's something one day, because this is just all theory crafting. We don't know. For all we know, the next hero that Blizzard releases could literally be an auto attack hero that has 2 passives, and his ultimate is like to res like after he dies. So like you never even have to cast an ability. And I've been disconnected to battle, so I'm gonna bring up the caster screen so you guys aren't looking at something silly because I was disconnected from battle.net. But yeah, I mean, the big debate for me is, do you want to leave those old heroes as kind of like beginner heroes that everybody can play no matter what in like hero leagues, or do you want to make every single hero on the entire roster competitive? It's a huge debate in MOBA balancing, and you know, there's lots of arguments being made both ways. You could be like Dota, where everybody is overpowered. You know, everybody is OP, therefore nobody is OP. Or you could just have those basic heroes. But you know, that's going to be the end of our topics for tonight that we have. But you know, if there's anything else that you guys want us to talk about as we're waiting, I think you have a game to cast soon, right?
Yeah, in 10 minutes. So we do have some, you know, some space to field questions. Actually, I didn't even realize this, but Tyrael did get some of his mana reduced in the PTR. So I'm glad that they're at least starting to address that much. Looks like 5 mana was taken off of each ability and 20 was taken off for Judgment. And I think that's a big step in the right direction for him, for sure.
Yeah, for sure, man.
Yeah, if you guys have questions or anything, we definitely invite and encourage discussion. Otherwise, we'll go into some final thoughts and things, please.
Yeah, some final thoughts, I guess. Just that, once again, first of all, thank all you guys for coming out. I appreciate it. Believe me, I'm a guy with a really busy schedule, so I know how it can be to just even sit down for like an hour or an hour and a half. So we appreciate all the suggestions out there. Let us know what we can do better for you. Like, just send it either to me or Lauren. We take all that feedback. Hopefully you're liking the way the production is going. If you like what we're doing, just let us know. Give us a follow either here on Lauren's channel or at my channel. But really enjoying things. Great. And, you know, something that I wanted to talk about before we do go tonight is that we are actually going to be including some guests in the future. So be looking for a third camera screen here sometime in the near future. We actually secured a really awesome guest in the future, who I can't say who it is yet because Lauren has forbade me. I actually signed the non-disclosure agreement. So he's got a recording of that and everything. But it's somebody that you guys are going to love.
Yeah, so I was approached by someone today at the professional level who expressed interest in being in the show. They said, like, they appreciate what we're doing for the community. And as a hint, I would say that this person is involved with a team that was at Burbank and will be at Sweden.
See, he's nicer to you guys than I am.
That's the hint I will give. Jay said just stopped in, but would you think that Medivh is too much team reliant to be effective? Similar to playing Abathur in a PUBG game. And that's a really good question. My answer to that would be yes. To get the most out of his kit, the player themselves have to know when to use their W at the right time. Again, it has a forgiving cooldown, but if you're not able to place that well, you're not going to get much value out of that. His Q doesn't do enough damage to where, or I don't think it ultimately will do enough damage to where it's like, I'm going to take Medivh for his Q alone. Like, that's the most team agnostic thing. And again, like I was saying with the portals, if your team doesn't know how to capitalize that, you're not going to get much value there. And if you can't effectively use Q and W either by virtue of yourself or your team, you know, utilizing that, there are better heroes that fit into that range kind of category. So I think he's listed as very hard for a reason.
Yep, I'll echo that statement completely. He's going to look like, you know, if you go and you take him to a quick match game and you expect to get all the highest statistics and carry the game, you're going to have a bad time. But, you know, if you can prevent some key ultimates from going out by using that W, you can definitely be as effective. But like Lauren said earlier, it comes to value. When you're talking about value, every hero can be effective, per se, on a map. But how much value will you get out of them? So most of the time, if you're solo queue, you could probably pick another specialist and do a lot more as a solo heroes player.
Yeah, and I really like that you brought up Abathur specifically, because I feel like the rest of the team almost has to play like they do have Abathur on their team. Medivh is a pretty squishy hero. I do think his Q is going to end up getting nerfed at some point. Maybe not at release, but at some point. And if you think about what Abathur does for a team as far as, you know, hatting someone, putting a shield on them, Medivh kind of fits into that role. And then he has some global presence. And, I mean, the portal's, you know, an interesting dynamic in and of itself. But I don't think you can play Medivh like you just have any regular player on your team, or any regular hero on your team. The rest of the team has to be resilient enough to stand on its own. It has to have the core of a tank, a healer, and damage dealers. And then Medivh is just like icing on the cake to the composition, and the icing is like all of his utility.
Precisely, man. So we're going to cut this, guys, down. We're going to have lots of awesome content coming next week. Remember, follow us on Twitter to get more updates, as well as we actually have a new Twitter page for Meta of the Storm. Follow that so you can keep sending us ideas of what you want to hear about. We'll completely, I'm not gonna lie, guys, we're so flexible. We'll completely change our schedule if you give us good topics. I mean, because that's what we want to do. We're here for the community. We're not here for ourselves. So yeah, like I said, I'm Bleedies. This is Lauren. Thank you guys for tuning in. Lauren's actually gonna be casting a game here in like 5 minutes, correct?
Yeah, top of the hour, I do have a game to cast right afterwards, so
just stick around.
Feel free to stick
channel.
around.
Yeah.
It's going to be fun.
I'm going to bring us up to our, show you guys our cool screen, our cool video again, and then I will let you guys go. So you guys have a good night. Thanks for stopping by.
See you guys.